internally displaced people, and on the other side, we have the small island. Okay? So the option with the internally displaced, I'm not checking what is worse here or who is facing the biggest difficulty. But on one hand, we have people that they can move. On the other hand, I'm going to explain the reasons why not. Okay? So the approach and the frameworks must be different, saying like, these people, their island is going underwater. So what are we doing? Where are they going? Are they going to swim? Definitely they can't walk. Okay? Or they don't even have the specs, sufficient specs. So next slide. I don't know who's changing the slides, but anyway. Land-based, going to the first picture. Afghanistan. Hundreds of people have been killed by flooding in May 2024. Let's share some data, recent data that have taken place according to IOM this year. Brazil, floods in the southern Rio Grande do Sul state in May have killed at least 161 people, affected more than 2.34 million people, affected people 43,000 refugees in Venezuela. East Africa, heavy rains since March 2024 have afflicted a fragile developing region that hosts 4.6 million refugees across 11 countries. We have also more than 637,000 people affected, with an estimated 2,034 people of them displaced. We have the worst flooding in Kenya, Burundi, Somalia, and Tanzania. Only in Kenya, we had this year 210 people killed and 20,000 refugees displaced from the refugee camps, while in Burundi, around 10% of farmland has been destroyed. So this is some information to give you an overview of what's going on before we go into the international frameworks. On the other hand, we have the Garbisubdu that, for some unknown reason, hasn't attracted much public attention. We all talk about the Pacific Islands, even me, actually, be included, about the Tuvalu, Vanuatu, Kiribati, the Marshall Islands, and all these surrounding islands, Fiji Islands, and how they are trying to confront the climate change issue. But the Pacific Islands, that very little has come they haven't really talked about them. So I came across an article in the Human Rights Watch, actually, talking about that in this small island, 1,200 meters off Panama, they've been living there for over 100 years, the indigenous communities, that they are called Guna. They have traditions, spiritual connections, they have all these nice things. But as you saw in the first picture, the territory, the land is going underwater, so they were forced to move. Now, why I decided to take this case, because it's different from the Pacific. That's one reason, because I want to show other cases as well. But even more so, I decided to pick this case study because we have the first successful completed relocation since the beginning of the climate change displacement, okay, that took place actually in June 2024. I'm going to share with you some information about that because it is quite, and this can easily be related to the law and policies developed so far, and then how to complement my second argument of the strategic human rights litigation is important because it advocates for these vulnerable communities that goes beyond the Eurocentric ideas of how we approach this kind of issues. So these Guna people, the indigenous people that have been living in the Gardusabdab, I think they pronounce it like that, island. It is a very small island, 400 meters by 150 meters long. They lived there for 100 years, and then at some point in 2015, they told them, you have to leave, otherwise you will be living in the sea. So since 2010, the community has came to a reluctant acceptance, actually, and say that the only solution here, what you see in the picture is very interesting because this is the most stable land that you can see on the island. This is where everyone is concentrated for all kinds of events, school, education, health center, okay? This is the mainland. It's not bigger than that, okay? Remind you that it's only 400 meters and times 150. So in 2010, they said you have to move. It's not enough space for everyone there. It's not healthy. And after years of community and NGO-led advocacy in 2017, the Panamanian Ministry of Housing committed to build 300 new homes in the inland, a small site within the Panamanian country. They didn't take any advice. They didn't have any conversations with the indigenous people. The people were already happy that a solution, an alternative was offered, hoping that they would take into consideration their culture, their traditions, customs, spiritual connections, and all this kind of stuff. So they were promised that by September 2023, they will be relocated. It was borderline, actually, because as you saw in the first picture, they were already living in water. So in 2023, nothing had happened. So finally, it was pushed for February 2024. And the relocation was completed, the first relocation that has been completed on this matter in June 2025. So everyone is happy, everyone, the NGO, the relevant policymakers, they are very satisfied about the outcome, but no one the indigenous communities that they say that the move has been rushed. This is the relocation, the 300 homes that they've built, which they don't have access to water, no lights, no functional healthcare system, lack of planning at social level, economic level, environmental level, ecological level. Guna people are not happy at all. Their new houses don't respect their traditional way of living. Their new town is built inland, disconnected from the sea, which is a crucial component for them. But everyone is celebrating. Other than that, everything seems fine. So my point, and that's why I showed you before the two pictures between dividing my research between land-based regions and the sea and the small island states. Not everyone is equally affected. Billions of people will become environmentally climate displaced persons. How accurate is this statement? Is it true? Because my paper that is coming up, I think next week, and I'll share it with you later, there is the component of entrapment, self-entrapment, king entrapment, financial entrapment, and various aspects of entrapment that doesn't really reflect that people will become environmentally climate displaced. So the environmental refugee question is a fraught and legally inappropriate term, okay, because people are stuck between the term that doesn't cover climate mobility, but at the same time, protections need to be put in place. So we see some deterministic and linear assumption rather than empirical evidence. We tend to overlook the differential vulnerabilities across and within regions, communities, and even households. For example, in a sudden onset event, such as a hurricane or wildfire, some households are less exposed or more resilient than others. For instance, people living directly on coastlines are more threatened by coastal erosion than their neighbors. Also, others may be exposed to environmental change, but manage to adapt in situ, Sea Pacific Islanders, and also this is one of the cases that they present more resistance, agency resistance, and they provide that they prefer to be trapped in their island rather than move and relocate. So we have also the wealthier households that may be able to install irrigation systems, invest in drought-resistant crops, purchase better fishing equipment, or build stronger homes that can withstand increasingly intense and frequent storms. And also, some also migrate so that others can stay, which is again the case of the Pacifica people. They have a ritual between their families where they choose one person that will migrate with several temporary projects that they have with Australia and New Zealand, and they are working on remittances. So they go, they work, they send the money back home in order to survive and work on resisting in relocating. And this is the latest one on this temporary work or facilitated partial relocation happening in November 2023 with the Philippine Treaty, where it was a bilateral agreement signed between Australia and the Tuvalu people that 8 people will be able to relocate per year, offering them, Australia offering them housing, jobs, visa to stay there. And then the decision within the families would be to send money home for the rest of the families or those that they don't want to relocate. So moving on, I would like to bring to your attention the climate-induced entrapment, which is something we need to consider when we design policies, and we are talking about bilateral agreements and how we can proceed with different designs on relocation, resettlement, and the similar concepts. First of all, lack of sources and assets. Zambia, for example, wealth districts show the positive climate migration relationship, but the poor districts were characterized by immobility. They couldn't afford it, which makes sense, okay, but it's not always about money. It also comes down to other factors like limited social networks. We have the case in the Mekong Delta of Vietnam. They have no social contacts who might provide advice, accommodation, or job prospects in a potential destination. And there's always the component of fear. I don't know where to go, so I'm not moving the known for an unknown destination with an unknown destiny. Then, physical barriers. In Tajikistan, we had road closures caused by avalanches, snowfall, and river flooding, which hampered the rural residents to move and relocate, and also threatened food security. Sudden disasters, like it happened in 2011 in Japan with the huge tsunami. People with disabilities and older people are likely to be trapped because they often face greater issues accessing early warnings and emergency information, as well as reaching shelters. Then, gender differences. We have to have in mind that the gender approach is fraught with inequalities. Senegal, young male fishermen often migrate internationally, mainly to fish in Mauritania, but women who stay behind to process and sell fish face greater challenges from declining local fish stocks, loss of biodiversity, and coastal erosion. Also, in Bangladesh, women were more likely to stay at home during cyclones because they feared of their safety in evacuation shelters and felt responsible for taking care of cattle, household items, and their home, which is actually cultural as well, because if I'm afraid for my life, I'm taking the first transport that I can find in front of me to run away, even by foot. But culturally speaking, we have to consider this aspect as well. So My paper on Surging Seas, Climate-Induced Entrapment and Legal Vacuums, the Dynamics of Pacific Mobility is coming on the next couple of weeks with Social and Legal Studies, where I mention a few things about further induced entrapment. So, trapped populations are defined as people who want to move but cannot do so. Yet, there are people and communities who do not want to leave their home despite their risk. All the studies made in the Pacific region, people, indigenous communities, even vulnerable communities, they were talking about their connection with their Banua, Fanua, Fenua, and the similarities of this concept, which is their land. Okay? Many so choose to stay in climate vulnerable areas, even when severe and irreversible environmental events occur. So we have places as the Pacific and West Africa that where people, they don't want to move. They have no willingness to move. So we need to we should avoid when designing policies, assuming what other people might want to. It, I think, suffices us or in the negotiations and conversation. So the decision may be influenced by environmental charges, or it may be shaped by other factors, such as attachment to particular place, Banwa, cultural ties, social status, gender roles, and kinship obligations. As I mentioned earlier about the kinship, from especially from the Tuvaluans and the Vanuatu, one person of the family can relocate because the family has to stay together. In Senegal, some people, especially who were older, denied accepting that they are trapped or feeling trapped. And they explained that their poverty had nothing to do with their immobility. This is the land of my grandparents, said the 61-year-old fisherman. Even if I had billions, he would have stayed where he is right now. So my last point on the climate-induced entrapment is about the Pacifica region again and the extreme and irreversible climate change. These communities are actively resisting migration and relocation. So community leaders in places such as Kiribati and Tuvalu have voiced their intentions to stay in their lands for cultural, spiritual, and political reasons, fully aware of the negative health and livelihood impacts they face as the waters rise. So in these lands, as in other climate-impacted regions, there are those who prefer to die rather than leave their place. So I hope this suffices as a first overview of what's going on with the climate impact recently and the conversations, discussions, and resistance from different indigenous communities from the Pacific and the Caribbean side as well. And I would like to bring to your attention the Sustainable Development Goals in the context of climate change. And we have here the Sustainable Goal number 13, where there is a reason why I bring that before I speak about the different regimes, because the climate action, the goal number 13 is talking about build knowledge and capacity, how we can do that if we don't ask the indigenous communities, implement the UNFCCC. Okay, it is implemented, but it's not binding, and several countries are saying we don't have to comply with that. Promote mechanisms to raise capacity for climate planning and management. Yes, but the 300 houses built in England, in Panama, does not offer a solution, a durable solution for the people, and people want to go back to where they are, to where they were. Then we have 13.1, strengthen resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related disasters, and also integrate climate change measures into policies and planning, which means for me mitigation and adaptation, okay? Which is fine. But then we have the Office for Environmental Protection that has assessed government progress of the environment in 2023-24. And if we go to goals, if we see goal 7, which is about mitigation and adaptation, we see that mitigation, past trends, it's light, it's green, sorry, improve, which means improving trends dominate, and then no progress whatsoever. And then we have adaptation, which were supposedly with the relocation and all the policies developed, it's supposed to adapt to the global current challenges. But as you see, the yellow represents trends showing a mixed picture with no progress or overall prospects of meetings, ambitions, targets. This is what I obtained, what was actually presented in the COP, the Conference of Parties 29, as well. So you see there is a huge divergence, the huge gap between what we desire, what we say and state, what kind of announcements we make with the reality. And now we're going into the international legal framework. How much time? It's 5 minutes only. Oh my God. So, in 2015, we had the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, recognizing in its paragraph 14 that climate change is one of the greatest challenges and the survival of many societies and of the biological support systems of the planet is at risk. Yes, thank you, we know that. So sustainable development, while the preamble to the Agenda for Sustainable Development recognizes the seriousness of the environmental challenge, only 3 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are of particular relevance to the environment. The first one, commit states to take urgent action and also adopt the 2015 Paris Agreement. The second, addresses conservation and sustainable use of the oceans and marine resources. And the third aims to conserve and sustainably manage terrestrial ecosystems such as forests and wetlands. So all these 3 are interlinked, yet none of this adds anything new to international environmental policy or law, but it does serve to reaffirm existing commitments. Commitments, unfortunately, that as it was mentioned during the COP29, have not been respected. So since I don't have much time, I'm not going into the 2015 Paris Agreement, actually to demonstrate how the wording is based on common but differentiated responsibilities, yet the disproportionate effects and the burden is put on the small islands. But I would like to quickly speak about the United Nations Framework Climate Change Convention. This actually speaks and frames that the sea level rise and sudden extreme events can cause the displacement of people, yes, and this displacement can in turn lead to the loss of culture, language, and traditions, as we can see, especially with the example of the Gardisugdub Island. So the UNFCCC tasked with addressing loss and damage within the UNFCCC process in the Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage. Subsequently, the WIM established the Task Force on Displacement, which successfully made recommendations on addressing climate-induced migration. However, these recommendations were very limited in research and scope, and the outcome was not providing concrete avenues and support for the hundreds of thousands of people likely to be fleeing their nations because of climate change. So I'm basing this part on beyond the United Nations framework to see what has happened and what has been so far tackled. And then I have left my slides for those that they would like to delve a little bit on the human rights strategic litigation, the recent developments and what has been treated so far. So outside of the UNFCCC scope, the legal frameworks have emerged continue to place the burden on island nations but there is a misguided presumption that the aim is to provide the avenues for the migrants to ultimately return home safely. So these assumptions are misplaced as islanders are unable to address the root causes for migration, and there is a real possibility that islanders will not have the option to return to their country of origin, especially if there is no country anymore because it has gone underwater. So Kelly and Shrekva identified 3 circumstances that we need to take, that if one of them is ticked, then protection must be offered. The first one is the legal impediment, substantial risk of inhuman or degrading treatment. The second one is factual impediment, no land, no airport, nothing. And the second one is humanitarian impediment. If there is no access, we cannot provide humanitarian assistance and aid, then if one of these 3 impediments can be ticked, then people should be deemed forcibly displaced and afforded protection. To complement this, in 2018, the UN General Assembly Global Compact on Refugees recognized that climate, environmental degradation, and natural disasters increasingly interact with the drivers of refugee movements, and acknowledges that countries should take steps to address drivers of migration. This is a very important step, actually, because call for action for countries is a first step in investigating how we can address the climate stranded people. And also, the Global Compact on Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration recognized that climate change is a cause of migration, because there is, again, resistance that climate change not necessarily is a cause for migration. And particularly in paragraph 18.1 of the Compact, emphasizes that despite the causes, adaptation in the country of origin is a priority. So they are pushing for adaptation. Things, of course, as we've seen earlier, have not taken place. So I think I will stop here. I will thank you for the invitation again, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.